come inside the ship here now, and this is the inner workings of this big monster. It's really hard to believe, Dan, how big this ship is until you really come down and look inside here. This used to be the old Highway 16 for those older folks that can remember when it was hauling cars back and forth from Milwaukee in different places, and it was loaded up with automobiles in here. And Dan and his crew have given this thing the grace and dignity that it has always should have had by restoring it back to a museum. And it just, I don't think you can count the man hours that you guys have put into this thing. Tens of thousands, and many people donated. And that's part of what the show is today. What we want to talk about is to, if you've got some memorabilia, or if you, you know, a lot of times I get calls at the vet center where somebody has passed away and the kids have gone in there cleaning a house and they found that old trunk down in the basement that nobody knew was there, but had all the dads or grandpas or great-grandpas military stuff in there, an old Foot Locker, and some of that documentation is just, you'll see some of it here that's been donated, and it's such vital history that we don't want to lose it. So we really want to make everybody be aware, if you hear about anybody or you run across it yourself, is to do not throw that stuff out. Please bring it down to Dan and his folks down here, and they'll go through it and categorize it and find a home for it someplace, huh?
Absolutely.
We got a gift shop right here. We'll go inside and take a look at the gift shop. There's always some memorabilia that you want to take home with you. And I'm going to hand this over to Dan. I'll let him give us a walking tour, and I'll just throw questions in as we go, Dan. So if you just want to give the tour, we'll you can rock and roll with it, buddy.
Before we walk in there, I might mention a couple of things here. We are at the beginning of the tank deck. This deck held 28 Sherman tanks, 28 tanks, and it could also hold 485 combat troops, and over 6,000 combat troops during World War II stepped on this deck and went out the bow doors that we just entered. It also carried over 5,000 German prisoners from France back to England right after D-Day. So the history of this ship is just unbelievable, and our purpose is to be sure that nobody ever forgets the history that's associated with this ship.
What it must have been like is, how many troops did you say could be in here?
485.
So you got 485 individuals, and unfortunately, like a draw, you're at the front.
Right.
And those big doors open up, and the ramp slides down, and there's guys up there on the hill or something trying to blow you away, shooting at you, and everybody says, move.
Exactly.
I just can't imagine what that wasn't like. And so many of these, that's what they did. They ran these things up till they hit the ground, or as close as they could get, to load it down. Sometimes that water would be over these guys' heads. I mean, that's as close as they get. And the full gear on there, they would just have to hit that deck. If any of you saw Band of Brothers, I think that was really showed the terror. That first 15 minutes of the film was what these guys had to go through. So,
well, we're in the gift shop now, and the gift shop is 1 year younger than the restoration effort. They came in a year after we started, and they started in a very small compartment, about 10 feet by 20 feet, and they've done such a great job. It's growing into this. Over here behind the counter is the president of the board of the gift shop, Joanne Boss. Treasurer, sorry. That's right, she's the treasurer. But Joanne and her board are responsible for all the fine things you see in here. They've got a collection of nautical items, children's items, typical souvenirs in terms of postcards, T-shirts, and so on. But it's all with a nautical theme, and it's all nice, clean, valuable things that we like to associate with the ship. So they're part of us, just like the artifacts that we display are.
oh, guys, well, we moved from the gift shop. There's some pretty cool stuff in there, don't they? As a matter of fact, I did a little shopping while the cameraman was spanning around there, and he had some cool shirts, even have Air Force shirts, and Dan was gracious enough to put some Air Force stuff in just for us Air Force guys, and I appreciate that, Dan. It was very nice. Now we're in a section called the home front. If you kind of look at the refrigerator, oh, no, we need a refrigerator, but if you kind of look at the equipment in here and the furniture, this is what it was like back in the 40s. You know, the magazines are always on the table there, and the old radio was going because there was a communication. It wasn't this satellite TV and twixting and twittering and whatever else they do on the phones. This was the old, everybody got the news from listening to these old radios, and you know, I can remember the stove like that at my grandma's house. And I think Dan and I were just talking, if anybody's out there who knows where there's an old refrigerator that has the, what was it, just the cooling coil would be up on the top. You'd know it, the old round ones where they cooled them up. If somebody's got one they'd like to donate, or they know one can be appropriated for a midnight rate or something, we'd be sure to look into it for you. But Dan, tell us a little bit about this, how this came about.
Well, we recognize that a lot of activity occurred in Muskegon during the war right here. And Muskegon was even given the name of the Arsenal of Democracy before Detroit was. And at one time, that Muskegon had the highest dollar input of war material per capita than any other city in the nation, and that's quite an honor. But we recognized early on that we needed a display on the ship to honor the home front as well, and that's what we have here. And we've just been a couple of years trying to collect memorabilia from that era, and we finally got enough to put it up. A couple of things in here are very special. The cooking utensils, the Indiana cupboard, it's called, core specials. The bottle of champagne on the table, it's still uncorked, still sitting there. That was given to us by Hoekstra a few years ago. His father brought that back from the liberation of France in World War II. So, yep. So that's very special, and we always like to point out the window with the flag with the blue star in it. That signifies that this household had a serviceman in the war, 2 stars, 2 servicemen, and so on. And should that star turn gold or be gold, that indicates the serviceman was killed in action. So we keep those kinds of things around as a memorial. And on the other side of the radio and that stuff over there are 2 cabinets that are full of World War II toys, ration stamps, publications, various small things that you would have seen during the war in somebody's home. So it's entirely appropriate that this becomes part of our memorial to veterans, because the home front certainly supported the veterans.
Well, here we go again. It's if I just look at these toys, and I remember again, my grandmother let us play with toys just like that. And if they're in a toy box someplace, forgotten, long past, like Toy Story was, don't ship them off someplace. Bring them down here to the museum and let's put them on display and let people know about it. But that's some great news, or history about Muskegon. I wasn't aware of that either. But I knew we had at one time 35,000 people worked downtown Muskegon here, right down where we are, and in all the industrial plants that were producing stuff for the war effort. And a lot of guys, you'd always hear them say, well, I couldn't go into the war. They wouldn't let me. They kept me in the factories. And they're kind of disappointed by the fact that they did get the chance to serve their country that way, but they don't realize that if they weren't here in these factories, the guys out there wouldn't be able to do anything by doing that. So,
yeah, I might mention too that the Department of Army and Department of Navy during World War II gave awards to cities and companies that met their quota of war material with high quality and low cost. And Muskegon actually had 7 companies that won that award. It was called the E Award. And it was very, very prestigious. The Department of Navy and Army sent their directors to the cities to present these awards to the company. And they were in Muskegon 7 times to present those awards. It was Kadon, Teledyne, CWC, Brunswick, I forget the others, but there were 7 altogether, and it's a fabulous thing. It's interesting to note that all of those companies sent thousands and thousands of local boys off to war, and they were replaced almost 100% with women workers. And while we celebrate what the soldiers did, we celebrate what the women did and what the home front did. Very important here. Back to the E Awards that were presented, with that presentation, the Department of Navy and Army gave the companies a large flag, about 3 feet wide, but about 10 feet long, kind of more like a banner. And it was red and white with the red E for excellence in it. And very, very seldom do you ever get to see one. And some gentleman, veteran, came on board last year who had retired from Teledyne, and he was helping them clean out the basement. And they found this old box down in the basement, and he asked if he could have it, and they said sure, either that or throw it away. But in there was the E for Excellence flag, and it's just an unbelievable piece of memorabilia. And we have it out being preserved, and it'll be mounted in a case that's 9 feet high, 3 feet wide, and it'll become part of our permanent display too. So it's very special.
This is kind of things we're talking about is looking around and finding out what's going on. And if you find something and you're not sure of it, bring it down to Dan, and his folks will tell you what it is, where it came from, and the history on it. And if you'd like to put it someplace where it'll always be on display and respected and honored, this is a phenomenal museum to do that. So thanks, Dan. Let's move on down the hallway here and see what else we got. Do you call these hallways or no? Galleyways. What do you call these things? We're moving on down though, so you'll follow us and we'll see you down a little bit farther down the road here.